I think this team need to continue to help Michigan football keep this winning mentality and this atmosphere that we have as a foundation for the guys to come after us.
There he goes, Cade McNamara, talking about keeping the tradition, keeping the winning tradition going. Not just having a one-off last year, winning the Big Ten. Welcome in on this Thursday. It's Thursday. That means Jim Scarcelli, the former Wolverine, joins us, and it is great to see him. Scar, how are you?
I'm fired up, man. Great hearing those guys they had in Chicago talking team, talking about the Wolverines. But quick thought, Denny. How about Michigan being selected as the #1 team in college sports? CBS had them overall athletics. You know, we're not just about football and men's basketball. We were dominant in everything. That's a great. That is a great thing for Michigan to be not, to be known for that.
Yeah, you look through all those sports when you start ticking through them and the success they had. Maybe baseball looked like they weren't, and then they pushed through and won the Big Ten tournament. Maybe that put them over the top, being able to win that national award. But yeah, winning national awards, so whether you're an individual sport, but doing that as a university, that's a nice feather in your cap.
Yeah, that's a great thing. That's just that's a compliment to our alumni, our donors really help contribute it, because you look at the resources and the facilities that all of our sports have. We are at the top. So that is a great thing. Those are decisions that our leadership made, and it's reflective in all the winning.
You know, it hasn't always been like that. You know, like when you were playing, and I remember when I first worked in Ann Arbor, there were people that would talk about the Michigan facilities, and they would rank it, and there wasn't, 16 or whatever teams, 14 teams even. Penn State might have been in there, but people used to say, yeah, Michigan's down there in Northwestern. They're not worried about the facilities. It's like, hey, we've got everything else. But Michigan recognized that. And from the time I worked in Ann Arbor till 2005, and then I left for 14 years, but about 5 years from so I can remember from like 2006 to 2010, they expanded the stadium with the suites and everything. That was the major uplift, but they did the Chrysler Center as well. You drive down Main Street. I remember the first time, probably around 2008 or whatever, driving down Main Street, and they had the digital LED board there. And then you had the Chrysler Center, and then you looked over and saw the stadium, and I thought, man, this is the future. Michigan this kind of looked like something out of the Jetsons.
Hey, man, that's Michigan, baby. Excellence in all areas. That's our Michigan. Excellence.
Well, in football, they are looking pretty good. You mentioned the media days and how it gets you fired up. It does. I get fired up when you come on a Thursday just talking about football, but I get it. You get in there, all those coaches, you get all those players, and it is the kickoff of the preseason. And now it's less than a week before Michigan hits the field and they officially start fall practice. So what are we going to talk about today with Jim Scarcelli? Well, we'll get his thoughts on Big Ten media days. Also, Scar is a former player. We'll see what he thinks of the trip around the state for the Maize and Blue. We'll single out two players for the Wolverines and talk about them. Cade McNamara being one. On the defensive line, Julius Welschof, another. But we'll start, Scar, with Jim Harbaugh. And, that's where you're going to take your cues from if you're the players. And the coach was up there at the podium. And then, he talked a bunch over the last couple days, specifically Tuesday. And I wanted to know what you thought of Harbaugh, and how do you think he did out there?
Hey, Jim's a great speaker, man. He's funny. He tells a good story. Sometimes a reporter will irritate him. He got irritated by that one guy asking about his non-league schedule. And Jim's not afraid to just give you a one-word answer or no answer at all. I kind of laughed at that when the one reporter asked it, but he's a great speaker. I love how he's always talking about his staff. He's always promoting his staff. And I like the way he worded his thoughts about the quarterback, that both of them are tough to beat out. He talked about the team being humble and not entitled, that they're fired up. He talked about his coordinators, but he emphasized beating Ohio State and beating Michigan State. He said, "Listen, we got to do that. That's our number one goal." And he understands it, man. You want to win the East. You got to beat those two. You got to beat our rival, both of our rivals. So that was important that he mentioned it. But what else did I see here? Again, he talks about his staff. I liked hearing how he talks about his staff and promote. He's always constantly sharing the wealth. Talked about his team being humble, but in general, Denny, listening to those other coaches. I'm an old high school coach, and I sized up the competition all the time at our league meetings. And when I hear these guys speak, all the Big Ten coaches, there are no weak links there. You hear these guys, I could see myself, if I was recruited by every one of those coaches, you could see where they would be appealing. Every single one of them, Jeff Brom, Scott Frost, Bielema, all of them, Dent Franklin, and you can see where all of them, and you can see that there's competition, how competitive it is to beat those other 13 guys. They're smart guys. The little things matter, beating those other 13 guys.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Even Tom Allen, if you even look at the bottom of the conference, Greg Schiano at Rutgers, you could see the appeal if he walked into your living room playing for Schiano. And then Tom Allen, I'll never forget during the pandemic, him standing in the end zone there in Bloomington, and he was being interviewed after the game, and all of his players walking up to him and shaking his hand. And it was a great presentation for Hoosier football, if there is such a thing. But, a real player's coach, you can see, man, that guy, you could get fired up playing for somebody like that. But yeah, across the board. And if you got your bottom two guys like that, just think about the rest of them.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Scott Frost. When I look at Scott Frost, it looks like he looked like he's aged 10 years in these last 4 years there. You don't know what they're going to be. They brought in a bunch of transfers, so we'll see what they got. But I hear Loxley, he's got his whole offensive line back. He's got his quarterback back. He's a guy that can recruit. You hear Ferentz. Ferentz has been there forever, man. He was there when I played.
33 years he's been there.
Yeah, he was the offensive line coach when I played. They're going to have great offensive line play. I know the Michigan coaches respected the heck out of him. And I don't know if I mentioned in the past, but there was talk. I had heard talk that one day he might be brought to Michigan. I don't want to dig that up, but go down that rabbit hole. But he's a guy that was very respected by the Michigan coaches. You can see how he's a good coach. And then Bielema, I think Illinois is going to be the most improved team in the Big Ten, because I think he's a great front seven coach, both sides of the ball. The question is, are there skill players there? And you hear Mel Tucker. You can feel the intensity in him, man. And he's got great coaches he hired. That guy ain't easy to beat, man. And
hey, Scar, are you like? Sorry to interrupt you. Are you like Bielema? Because he went up there, and he had his tie on. And we know he's at Wisconsin. They went down to Arkansas. Now he's with Illinois there. But he said he wanted all of his players, to have ties on. But then he talked to his staff, and they said, hey, let them do whatever they want. So they came in. Nobody had a tie on. And then he said, they were all wearing tennis shoes. If you were running things, Scar, would you say ties and the correct footwear, or would you bend like Bielema did and allow him to come on in with open shirts and tennis shoes?
As a college coach, as a high school coach, you're teaching kids a lot of different values, period. You are not just teaching them to play football. So I played for Bo Schembechler, okay? And we had blue blazers and we wore a tie when we traveled. And that was a belief he had. He wanted to teach you, listen, you walk into we're all business. We're going to look good. We're going to look classy. I'm a guy that also ran a business, Denny. I used to see guys walk in for job interviews, not looking as good as maybe they should. What values are you teaching your players? So if you ask me, I would sell my team, sell my players, that I would want them to look good. I would want suit and tie. Jim Harbaugh.
What about your players in high school, Scar? Did you demand that they wore ties on the road, on the bus?
Well, we listen. High school, you wear there's no, you travel in your uniform. You go on the bus and you come back. But when we had banquets and we did those things, I was encouraging them to look good. And most of the kids, I coach, but I think those are values that each individual coach would have. And what do they want to teach kids? Again, I would tell stories about, me in the interviewing process of how guys didn't take pride in how they looked walking into an interview. So I would sell my guys on, there's a time and a place for the tennis shoes, and there's a time and a place for the tie. That would be my argument, and that would be the value. And it looks like Jim agreed with me, unless he was just by coincidence, all his players put on ties. But, every coach has a different opinion. I would try to convince them through through stories and the importance of looking good.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's overrated, but I do think Michigan looks good when they do their thumbnail pictures, whether it's for the program or anything else. Everybody's got a tie on a shirt, so it looks good. So
yeah, Tom Allen again. He's you could see where Danny, you make a great point. You could see if that guy's recruiting you, he's tough to beat, man. You could see the heart in that guy, how he would come through as a guy who really cares about his players, and he's a real good defensive coach. Again, you don't know what we're going to get from them. He talked about all his transfers. So we don't know we don't know what that Indiana team is going to look like. But yeah, the impression I got is there are good coaches that we're competing against. We got a great coach. Our guy can talk. But again, about the public speaking, I remember hearing Tom Osborne, Denny, when we played them in the Fiesta Bowl. He spoke, and he was a mild-mannered, put-you-to-sleep kind of guy. And then you hear Lou Holtz. He was a magician. He could tell great stories. So I don't think there's any correlation between being a great speaker and being a great coach. There's zero correlation, in my opinion, because we've seen great ones that can tell great stories and do magic tricks like Lou Holtz. And then there's guys like Tom Osborne who put you to sleep, but he was a great coach.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But somebody that, the covers teams there, that you really like a coach that, can give a good story and, sell the program. And you're so many times you're sitting up in front of the camera and you have to, not just sell the team, but you're selling the university, you're the spokesman. So being able to get up there and relay that to everybody is something that, is part of it. And if you're good at it, it can help you in a lot of ways. But you're right. As long as you get the guys to get out there and play for you, that's it. It doesn't really, to me, seem like Bill Belichick is, he's terrible in front of the media. He's terrible at the podium. I don't know how, if you had him as a coach, you get brought into some of those meeting rooms and you get him mic'd up on the sideline. A lot of times he sounds like a big SOB. I'd say the same thing about one of the greats in Bill Parcells, but those are two of the greatest coaches that, I've ever played. So there you go. There's right against me of talking about covering a guy and having him be interesting.
Yeah, the professional coach, he's not going into living rooms recruiting, and that's a different deal. The college, the college coach is giving speeches and going to different banquets and talking, and that overall impression, the kids and the parents are sizing up. How, what kind of charisma and what does he have, and sometimes it can make a difference how people make decisions about sending their kids to those schools. But overall, Michigan, I like the ties. I like the way our guys were talking. I liked listening to Mozzie and and I like the answers from Alls talking about the Ohio State game being a hell of a lot more important than a touchdown catch. But our guys were trained. They talk good. They're intelligent, and I like Jerry DiNardo, Danny. I don't know if I told you, but Jerry DiNardo recruited me a long time ago. So I know Jerry DiNardo from way back. He was a guy that was an assistant at Eastern Michigan University. Now, he was a great player at Notre Dame. He was an All-American player at Notre Dame. But Bill McCartney then took him out to Colorado, where they built that thing at Colorado. But I love listening to Jerry. He was a former player, and he's a coach, and he's got good insight. I like Howard, too. Howard's, those guys are good. But I really like listening to Coach DiNardo.
Howard Griffin you're talking about, who's on the set there with Dave Revson, who's been there for like 16 years. Yeah, it stood out to me because Dave Revson, when he had all the Michigan players up there, he said, hey, it's the first time I've had an opportunity, because most of the time, or the 16 years that I've been here, I'm asking everybody when you're going to beat Ohio State. You guys just did it. So it wasn't too far away. Always thinking about that Ohio State game. Let's get some of the feedback up here. Here's Otis, who says he liked the comments that Harbaugh made on the name, image, and likeness. With Santa, Harbaugh can be turned loose. Harbaugh has always been an advocate for the players being rewarded. I think we'll see an increase in recruiting. And that was my takeaway yesterday as well, Otis. I don't know if you heard that, Scar, but we've been on. We talk about it almost every week that you've been on, name, image, and likeness. And, I know Jim, he doubled down on his transformative over transactional motto over the summer, and I didn't like that. I wanted him to expand on it, or behind the scenes have him working on it. But I thought he had a home run the way that he talked about name, image, and likeness. Somebody came in there and talked about a salary cap situation with Ohio State and mentioned that $13 million. And Harbaugh says that he thinks Michigan could more than double that, which was a great response. And then he wondered why the players couldn't get money from the Big Ten media deal that's forthcoming, that's being negotiated. I don't think the presidents and athletic directors like to hear that from him, but so what? Man, that was, if I'm a player, I'm out there, I'm like, yeah, Jim, what about this $75 million? Where are the players getting cut in on that? So, yeah, he did a great job. And when he doesn't do a good job, sometimes you have to say, yeah, I didn't really like, what he was doing up there. But I really liked what he was saying about name, image, and likeness. I thought he scored big there. And I like coaches to come out and state their goals too. A lot of times I hear coaches, you say, hey, what are your guys' goals? Well, we're just taking one game at a time, and we're not, our team goals, we have them, we're not telling you what they are. Okay. Like what, but Harbaugh coming out there, hey, they want to beat their rivals. They want to win the Big Ten again. They want to win the national championship. That should fire you up if you're a Michigan fan. He did a great job.
Yeah, hey, I played with Jim. I remember when he was driving a piece of junk, a Volkswagen Bug, and I was driving a piece of junk, beat up Nova, and he's talking about, because, getting these players compensated. It's so easy for for Kevin Warren to talk about expanding the playoffs, 8 games, 8 teams, 16 teams, but extra games for players. We don't want to talk about paying extra money for the players that are going to play these extra games. The NFL just went to 17 games. Do you think the NFL players got paid extra for playing an extra game? That's anyway, right. I agree with you, Denny. He's trying to he understands he needs it to compete in recruiting, and he's asking listen, there's going to be $1 billion deal here for this TV contract, and let's give the breadwinners a bigger cut of this pie there. If that's part of the deal there. So yeah, I love him for saying it. It can only help in recruiting, but we got to give him the bankroll to compete against the Texas A&Ms and these guys that are out there.
Yeah, well, when he talks about he thinks Michigan can do double of what Ohio State is, that's a little bit different than shying away from, no, we're not wading into those waters. It was a completely different approach from what the tune he was laying out there earlier. This was an absolute different track. It wasn't a diss track, but it was laying it down, saying Michigan's here and they're ready. This is the way it's going to go. And Michigan, I saw it described, the name, image, and likeness, and Michigan's approach today, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Everybody jumped out there and, was waving around, maybe had cash in their hand, but, here's Michigan steady, have their arms going and their legs are moving. And so they're not going to be left behind when it comes down to, as you said last week, Scar, they're not going to be out NIL'd.
Yeah. So, and it's early, man. Here we are, July. Yeah, okay, a lot of guys have committed. A lot of the great top 250, they're committed. But guess what? Michigan might be able to come back to the table, okay, with something different. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think Michigan's going to – you're going to see Michigan turn some of these kids. I'm hoping. I think Michigan's going to turn some of these kids, the closer we get to that first signing day. because there's going to these discussions that are going on up in Ann Arbor about giving our coach the firepower to not get out nilled. So some of those guys that were committed, you watch, we might flip some of them when coach has a bigger bankroll.
Yeah, a lot of different ideas that we talked about. I loved you bringing up Texas A&M last week and how they're going with $25,000 per year for the players, and then it also includes, what was it, 10 to 15 non-scholarship athletes. And you think about what Michigan could do if they got into a situation where it went, and they already talked about this, so about rewarding players as they went along. And if you had, if you went 25, 50, 75, 100 by the time you were a senior, and the same thing applied to some of the walk-ons. Heck, you were a walk-on, you could essentially be a scholarship player. So there's a lot of things that they can do and they can break out. I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of people that are working very hard behind the scenes. Not a lot of people out front, running around talking about waving cash and inducements, but people are, recognizing the way this is going to play out, and it's not going to end anytime soon. So you're going to have to get with it if you want to stay up with all these other teams that look like Michigan is. I'm very encouraged about, and sometimes that's what it takes, is to see your leader out there and saying the things like Jim Harbaugh said on Tuesday. So great job by him.
Danny, real quick, I want to comment on one last thing Jim said that was kind of funny to me, and I laughed how he talked about his dad making the statement about every man in America should stay 2 weeks in a dorm room, where there's no air conditioning, and it's in the middle of August where it's hot and you got your fan going. And I laughed at that because it just brought back memories of double sessions in August, days like, we got going on now, 90 degrees here in Michigan, and you got your fan going. And it's, it brought back memories. To this day, Denny, I sleep with a fan because you just got used to it. You had to have your fan going at old South Quad there to kind of drown out the noise and kind of cool yourself off. But it just brought back funny memories. I got to tell one story real quick, Denny. Back in my day, we used to had to pass a fitness test. It was 1.5 miles. There was a sprint test. You had to make 10 sprints. You had to do some lifts. And if you didn't, if your roommate, or if you didn't pass the test, you had to be up at 6 a.m. to run 1 mile before the day even started. Everybody else got up at 6:30, ate their breakfast, and then we went about the day. But if you didn't pass your fitness test for 2 weeks, you had to run 1 mile at 6 a.m. So it was important that you passed the test, but not only was it important that you passed it, that you had a roommate that passed it, because otherwise they were waking your room up at 6 a.m. to get your roommate out there to run. So just an interesting little story I thought I would share about the dorm and how hot it was in the Jack Harbaugh, how Jim related that old Jack Harbaugh story.
What if you got in trouble at Michigan? Did you have to run with your classmates or your position group or something like that? I've heard some stories like that. What if somebody got in trouble back at Michigan and they had to run? Scar, did they have to run by themselves, or did the captains have to run with them? How did that work?
I never. I know
you
guys.
Got in trouble, huh?
No, I got in trouble one time.
Oh, okay.
I was punished in a different way, but I do know some guys that did screw up, and they had to go down to the football building and run with guys. I remember one of my first days on campus in practice. A big, highly recruited guy. He came in a couple minutes late for practice, and they had him running for weeks just for being late. One day they had him running before practice. So that sent a message, and I never forget the look on Bo's eyes when the guy walked in late. It's like, we just don't do it. You set your watch to Bo time. The first practice, he said, okay. So, everybody was 15 minutes early. I mean, if he said 4:00, we were there. You had 100 guys there at 3:45. So that's just how it was.
Scar, I saw the Lions with a video yesterday. They opened up training camp, and they were doing down-ups. Is that something at Michigan, like if you got in trouble, that they would get over there and blow the whistle and you had to do down-ups? We're talking like during practice. Was there anything like that, or you had to get down and give them 15 or 25?
Some coaches use that as a punishment. A lot of guys just use it as a form of conditioning. Coach Moeller loved them as a form of conditioning because you got to get up off the ground. That's football. You got to get up down the ground and get up off the ground, and it's tough, and you got to know how to do them. And but a lot of coaches use them as a punishment. Some coaches use them as conditioning. I guess Vince Lombardi used to start practice with like 100 of them. It's football, man. It's getting you in shape. It's tough.
Well, Scar, I'll give you my quick story about down ups and 10th grade junior varsity at Livonia Franklin. We were on a punt return team, and the coach comes in and says, all right, we're not rushing the punter. So this is going to be returned. So everybody get it? Yeah, we're in the huddle, and they're like, all right, it's a return. And we had this kid named Julius, and, they snap the ball, and he runs in and nails the punter. He doesn't even block it, hits his plant leg, blows him up, and the coach goes crazy, snatching his face mask. He gets up to him, and he said, who put him up to this? What are you, and he said, if you so much as touch this punter, you cost us 15 yards. That would have been a turnover. You're going to almost kill our punter. It's like, if you do it again, we're doing down ups for the rest of the practice. They looked over everybody, and everybody's looking over like, what are you doing, Julius, you idiot? They get in the huddle, and they're like, all right, let's just return the ball. Sure enough, standing there, they snap the ball. Julius goes right after the punter again, blocks the punt, runs into him, and the coach just flips out, and he blew his whistle as he promised. He looked over, he said, this is on you. Blew the whistle for the next 2 hours. Up, down. So it felt like it got dark. I don't know. I might be exaggerating that part, but I do remember after you do 10, 15, 20, 30 of those, it gets pretty difficult getting back up off the ground.
Yeah. My 5 years at Michigan, it was never used as a form of punishment by the coaches I had. McCartney, Moeller, my coaches didn't do it. But I've done it as a form of punishment sometimes as a high school coach. So it's every coach has a different idea there.
All right. We are going to get to Jim Harbaugh's idea of taking his team around the state. Michigan's summer trip around Michigan. So they went up, you can correct me they went up to Flint, and then they went over to Muskegon, up to Traverse City. I think they're heading up to Mackinac. So this has been the trip so far. What have you made of Michigan's trip around the state before they start fall camp coming up on Wednesday?
Again, this goes to what Jim Harbaugh is about. I care about the kid. I care about the overall development. That's why his guys wear ties. He thinks that matters. He thinks it's important that you go to other countries and see other cultures. He thinks that matters. So parents that when they talk to Jim Harbaugh, they see that this guy isn't just about football. He wants them to go and help out at a prison. He wants them to know that, look, you have an opportunity. You're in a special situation. See what's going on here. See the world. See other parts of our great state. It tells you what he's about. Now, the what's going on in recruiting now. Some of these extra things like great education, great alumni, trips, these things are being diminished because of the NIL. And it's getting to be more about who's got a bigger bankroll. But I love it. It built, and he talked about it. It's all the things that I would want us, because I used to do things with my team too. You take them places to build team. You want them to spend time with each other outside of football to learn to love each other and know each other. And he talked about, building team and learning about, different cultures and going in different environments. And so it's a great overall experience. And you're seeing things that can help with recruiting, but I think it's great. I'm glad he continues to do it. I think it was a great idea to go locally and see our state. I was privileged. I had parents that we went on trips. We've seen a lot of the places that he's taken the kids. I was able to see as a young kid, but there's a lot of guys in our state that haven't seen it. And the majority of our kids are from outside of the state. So it's a great thing for them to see Muskegon, Traverse City, and all these things that he's showing. And again, it helps recruiting, and the kids see that he cares about them. Again, it's before camp. I liked how Jim talked about it, because before camp, Denny, mentally, it's tough. You were a former high school player. In college, it was even more demanding. You got to slowly get your mind ready. He talked about counting down the days, and you literally are, because you're trying to enjoy yourself, but you know what's coming. You know the storm that's coming. The being in the dorm room and the double sessions and the demands of those 2 tough weeks before your first game. So, and those are brutal times where guys are leaving left and right. When I was playing, you're going to see a team. You're going to see a team meeting room, and the next day, this guy's gone or that guy's gone, or they just left because it was so demanding. So he did talk about doing it before camp, but I understand how it clears your mind, but you know what's coming.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it feels like it's a stroke of genius on a number of levels. I don't know if it's a chamber of commerce of Michigan or a chamber of tourism or whatever else, but they spend so much money on commercials like Pure Michigan, and to see Michigan, all the TV stations, all these different reporters at every stop, and anybody and here we are talking about it as well. I've been up the west side of the coast there of Michigan, gone up to Traverse City and seen the water. I mean, it is. There's nothing like it. I mean, it is as good as any place in the world, especially right now. It is great up there, and going up to Mackinac is the same way. Everybody should do that. So whatever it's worth in tourism dollars, I know all that other stuff is important as well, but it's huge for the overall state and for people that are checking that out, thinking, yeah, you know what, I gotta get up to the UP, gotta go up to Mackinac, whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot to see out here, man. See different cities and overall education.
Okay, let's bring you back to football and Indianapolis. Harbaugh did talk a little bit about his team, and he did mention his quarterbacks. You knew he was going to get asked about the quarterback competition, and he said Cade is the starting quarterback. First practice, he'll be with the first team eventually during camp. JJ will get the same opportunity. What did you make of what Harbaugh had to say about the quarterback battle at Michigan?
Yeah, he just basically laid it out. Cade's getting the first crack, but JJ's close, just like every other position on that team. Every other guy on that football team is competing. I don't think anybody is entitled to. I don't care what they did last year. I just think that there is a mindset of competition on State Street in Ann Arbor that you come every day and you better compete because somebody wants your job. And I think that's what he's saying there. And I know Jim as a player, and he's about competition, compete, fight every day. You better not have bad practices. You better not have a couple bad practices, because you might be with a different jersey the next day. It's one of the worst things for them to call a different guy into that first group, because I've been that guy. I was that guy that was, on third string with the demo squad, and then you get called up to second string, and that's a great, beautiful day. And then I was that guy to move up to first, and then I've been the guy to move down too, and that's a terrible feeling, because that was the kind of culture we grew up in, and I think Jim has that same kind of hey, you got to come and practice every day for all positions, not just the quarterback position. But he's going to play both these guys. We are in a great situation at quarterback.
Yeah, and I want to say this about I noticed the Michigan fans over the last few days getting upset at the media, even local media, saying there's no quarterback controversy here. People need to lay off of that. When you are a big diehard fan and you follow every single move, you know the team. Not everybody's as big a fan as you, but there are millions still more of college football fans, and they really know two things. They know about the coach and to criticize or to, say how great he is. And then they know the quarterback position. And Harbaugh generates a lot of interest when it comes down to talking about the coaches. We all know that. Anything he says, people are going to dive into it and talk about. And the quarterback position. And you can suggest and you can make a case that Michigan has a quarterback controversy. Now, Jim, you like the idea of playing two. I know I don't like the idea of playing two. I like just having one. I know that Michigan's going to play two. I think that one of them is going to overtake the other when the season goes on. I want what's best for the team. So I'm not, telling everybody that it's going wrong, but everything will be fine as long as Michigan's winning and the starting quarterback is playing well. If those two things happen, there's no quarterback controversy. If Michigan comes out and they go 5-0, they beat Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn, Maryland, and they go to Iowa, and they're 5-0, and Cade McNamara starts all those games, and he plays well, and Michigan wins, there's no quarterback controversy.
That's a lot of that term controversy has to do many times with what is the second string guy's attitude. You know, how is he approaching things? And Jim had a great comment. You know, he said competitive but not combative. Competitive but not combative. We want to compete like heck. The whole team for playing time, for positions, everybody's competing. But we're going to love our teammate. We're going to still find a way to love them and understand that we're going to compete like heck, but we are not going to bring dissension. And JJ has not ever said anything that would give anybody indication that he's not a team guy. You know he wants to play. You know he wants to start. But he gives the appearance that he's a team guy. And Jim, don't underestimate Jim Harbaugh's history as a player. And, you know, the guy's he played a long time, man. And he was a quarterback. He was the starter. He was the backup. He gets it. He understands the position both of these guys are in. And I think that it's not by accident that our guys handle it in a good way, that JJ has the great attitude. And, you know, I think that's all.
Both of those guys do have great attitudes, and that goes a long way. And it sounds nuts knowing what Jim Harbaugh, the position that he played at Michigan, what he did in the NFL, played quarterback, a quarterback coach, head coach, you know, that's all. I don't know if there's anybody more qualified in the world to evaluate a quarterback and to put him out there. Meanwhile, the last 2 or 3 quarterbacks that he's picked previous to this last year, I've questioned. And so, like, when you have 2 of them out there and how he's playing it just opens yourself up and you know, and what you're doing here. So as long as Michigan's winning and one of them's playing well, you know, he's going to be okay. But, you know, that's the part. That's why a lot of managers, like, they like having defined roles in a bullpen. They like having a setup guy, and they like having a closer, because if they don't, they start moving around. It just opens yourself up for criticism. But you know what? Jim's got big shoulders. He doesn't mind having the criticism. And I also think that it takes, and it's only been over the last couple of years. We saw Nick Saban do it in the championship game, you know, putting in Tunga Vailoa when Jalen Hurts was the starter, and he won a championship. You saw Dabo Swinney do it with Trevor Lawrence as a true freshman, and he had a senior quarterback, and he did it throughout the season. Put him in there. Harbaugh did it. Now, Alex Smith got hurt when he was with the 49ers, and he put Kaepernick in that. But you know what? Alex Smith never took that starting job over, and a lot of people prior to that believed in the saying, Scar, that you don't lose your job because of injury. And if people were saying that out in San Francisco, well, you know, that wasn't what Harbaugh was prescribing to, because Kaepernick never looked back when Alex Smith was ready and took him to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Jim's been through it, and he knows how to mentally prepare these guys. And our guys are on the same page. They're on the same team. I shared time with a guy at my position. My first year starting, I played 90% of the snaps, but the coaches got a little different philosophy my 5th year, and my backup got more reps, and I was totally fine with it. I got up, wasn't playing as tired as much. So I got, you know, we're going to rotate our running backs. So our guys are on board. We're a team. He's got them focused on team. I want to say this about McNamara. There was a comment there. You know, Howard Griffith referred to him as a manager. That term manager, what does that mean?
Game manager?
Does that mean he's an accurate passer? Tom Brady's a manager. Does that mean you're an accurate passer? Does that mean you secure the football? Does that mean you get the team in the right play? Does that mean you know when to throw the ball away so you don't get sacked? What does that mean?
Well, I agree with Howard Griffin. I think Cade McNamara is a game manager. Game manager shouldn't be looked at in a negative light. Tom Brady, at times in the first couple of years, it felt like he was a game manager until he needed to win the game of the fourth quarter, and then he was a playmaker. Patrick Mahomes isn't a game manager. Alex Smith was a game manager. A game manager is you're not out there shouldering the whole load. you're not throwing the ball 40 times. You're not necessarily the most important person, even though the quarterback usually is, in winning or losing. You're not putting the ball up left and right. And Cade McNamara, last year, there's a lot of games where he only threw the ball like 14 times. But he did a really good job as a game manager, handing it off, getting the team in the right play, not turning it over, no negative plays. He really is a game manager. He's the ultimate game manager. He needed to throw it a little bit against Nebraska when Michigan was giving up 29 points in the second half. So he has shown some flashes. And he is, if you listen to Scar McNamara this offseason, he has mentioned a number of times how he needs to take a step forward. He needs to be more of a playmaker. He's basically saying, I need to be more of a playmaker and not a game manager, even though he didn't use those words, because, the guy behind him is not a game manager. The guy behind him is a playmaker.
Yeah, well, the guy behind him fumbled the ball at Michigan State. Okay, so, I want to know what the hell the definition of a game manager is. I've heard that term used many, many times, and I don't know, man. But if you play the kind of football what I saw from McNamara last year, I'll take it. I don't know.
Take a win. If there's winning every game, like I think Michigan, and I pretty much know that they're going to throw the ball a lot more this year. But if they really came out and played it the same way this year and played the ground and pound game, it would frustrate everybody, especially through the first 3 or 4 games where they're going to be double-digit favorites if they just continue just go ground and pound and ground and pound. But if they use that and it was effective on the road against Iowa, and then they go 11-0, and they use the ground and pound theory, like, hey, if it works, it works. You can't get too upset if they're winning, and they're going with the ground and pound, and Cade is managing the game, even though you don't like it.
I just think the term it tends to be
it does tend to be negative, and it shouldn't be.
It should be if does that mean that does it mean you secure the ball? Does it mean you throw the ball out of bounds instead of taking a snap? Does it mean you get your team in the right play? Does it mean you're an accurate passer? Does it mean you seldom get sacked and those are the things that I want in my quarterback. So whatever the heck you want to give the label to a guy that does that, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think it can be a positive thing. It was a positive thing for Michigan last year. Before we move on to the next point, Otis saying, what if cutting minutes for JJ preserves his body for the futures? Players like JJ McCarthy get injured more often. Playing Cade could help him go deep into the season. And he says, Otis does, remember when the school down south won a national championship with their third string quarterback, and that was 12 gauge. CJ Wolverine says Michigan fans will never be happy. First Big Ten title in 15 years, I think 17 years. And they're still not happy with how they won it. LOL. Well, there's a part to that. To me, it's if you're going to play 2 quarterbacks, I'll go back to what I was saying before. You're only going to, most people just look at the head coach and the quarterback. So when you're playing 2 quarterbacks, you're going to say, hey, does the head coach know what he's doing? And when you play 2 quarterbacks, it automatically opens you up for criticism. Jim Harbaugh got ripped nationally and probably a little bit here locally after the Michigan State game for what you're talking about, because McCarthy fumbled the ball. He had another one that I think that he fumbled and it went out of bounds when they were down in the red zone. And nationally, there was a narrative that Jim Harbaugh is going to come back. You play with fire, you're going to get burned. That's what happened up in Michigan State. Jim Harbaugh going foolishly with a 2 quarterback system. And, it was forgotten after they went out and ripped off, the rest of their Big Ten games and won, including winning the Big Ten championship. But if that wouldn't have happened, the idea that he fumbled it, Harbaugh, the quarterbacks, would have, and especially considering his track record, I mean, that would be page 1 and number 1 bullet point on the criticism of Jim Harbaugh. If Michigan didn't win the Big Ten championship last year, it would have been that Harbaugh screws up and has you wouldn't believe it because of his track record, but he has not been able to figure out the quarterbacks at Michigan.
Yeah, let me be clear. In no way, shape, or form am I coming after JJ. I think he's a great player. We had a mistake there at Michigan State. It is what it is. I am all about playing 2 quarterbacks, and the number 1 reason why is I know this as a defensive coach, and I know this as a defensive football player. When you run your quarterback, it makes it harder to defend an offense. Okay, we've got the RPO game. It's part of our offense, run, pass, option. It's what we do, and it makes it hard to defend run, pass, option, the RPO stuff. And part of it involves the quarterback running. So if you're going to run that kind of an offense, which is hard to defend, you better have two quarterbacks if you're going to run your guy. I don't have any sympathy for teams that run the heck out of their quarterback and they don't have and they don't get their backup quarterback ready to play. You better have your backup quarterback ready to play if you're going to run your first string quarterback. So that's the biggest reason I like the idea of having two. They're both very good players. It improves our depth. It helps our recruiting. There's so many benefits to it. But the big thing is I sleep better at night. I want the defense to have to defend quarterback run from both of our guys. There's a lot of advantages to it.
Yeah, the reason I don't like it is because in the history of college football, it almost never works. You could put a guy in for a little bit like they did with JJ, and I know Otis was mentioning Ohio State. They had guys in there because guys were hurt. I know Florida would put Tim Tebow in when he was a true freshman, but he was coming in goal line to do some of that jump pass for Chris Leak. For the most part, I go back to Ohio State when they had Stanley Jackson, and they had Joe Germain, and they were playing Stanley Jackson, and Joe Germain started every game until the Michigan game when they started Stanley Jackson, and he threw a couple interceptions, and Ohio State lost that game. It doesn't work historically in college football playing two quarterbacks. That's why I don't like it.
Yeah, well, that's why we've got this great talk.
You don't do it in the NFL either, Scar. And the two college football and the NFL, I know there's a lot of differences, but there's an awful lot of similarities. No team in the NFL plays two quarterbacks.
Yeah, you can make the argument why someone like the Ravens should, because they run the heck out of their quarterback. If I'm John Harbaugh, I want to get this backup guy ready to go because I run him a lot. But yeah, the New England offenses, you don't need to do it as much. What does Darius have to say? A lot of people hold that fumble against JG, but Jim said Blake should take care of the ball. We think Cade takes care of the ball, but that pick when we were about to go. No, I get it. You're right, Darius. Cade has made some mistakes, but I'm not taking a shot at JJ. He also threw some bad. I get it. He throws some. He also threw some really bad picks and fumbled against Georgia too. JJ has the potential to manage the game and do more. Not sure if Cade can, and I've liked Cade since the 2020 season. Great points. I've tried to make my point as to why I like both of them. And I would rather go into this season, the Purdue coach talked about his quarterback. Ohio State talked about his great quarterback. But what happens if one of those guys get hurt? We don't even know who the backup is at Ohio State. We know we got two. So I'm sleeping good at night if I'm Jim Harbaugh, that I got two guys. I can run my quarterback without fear. I can stress the defense by running them. And that's my argument why I want to play both of them. And I'm comfortable with it.
All right. It seems like we could talk about Cade McNamara and the quarterback position and game managing all day long if we wanted to. But we also were going to talk about another player, and that was Julius Welschof, who is a senior defensive lineman. And Scar, you told me that there's talk of him being moved to defensive end. You'll have to explain that because, he's a defensive tackle, nose guard, defensive end in a 3-4, and then you got defensive end, outside linebacker. So I put who I think if you went to a front four, who would be the starters for Michigan, Morris, Upshaw, Mozzie Smith, and Chris Jenkins. Where would he have fit in the two deep? And where will he now if he makes that move?
Well, he was playing inside, either the three technique or the one technique. A three technique plays between a guard and tackle. They are playing between 200-300-pound guys. Okay, Mozzie plays the one, plays between the guard and the center. They're playing between 300-pound guys.
And that's a nose guard, you would say, not a defensive tackle. That's the difference.
That's where they've had Julius playing inside, okay, with the big guys, taking on the double teams all day long. If you look at the kid's frame, it looks like, to me, he would have more success on the edge, playing where Hutchinson played, Upshaw, Harrell, Mike Morris, and competing against. I think that's what I read it somewhere, Denny, and I heard it, and there was talk of moving him to the edge where he would compete with, Morris, McGregor, Harrell, Upshaw, and those guys. So his body type, to me, looks like he might have more success there, but there's a whole different learning curve there now. Playing inside is a whole different game than playing on the edge. When you're on the edge, you've got to play reverses and bootlegs and naked bootlegs, and you've got to understand you're going to drop in coverage a little bit, and you're going to cover backs, maybe some tight ends. You're going to cover flats, and there's a different world out there in terms of seeing the crackback blocks and all the different stuff that interior guys don't have to deal with. So, but looking at his frame, he looks like that could be a better position for him. So he'll have to compete against some really good players to get on the field, though.
Yeah, body type, and because of his heritage German, there was a defensive end that played for Florida State about 10, 12 years ago, ended up being a first-round pick. His name was Bjorn Warner. And, so I remember when Welschof came in, I'm like, hey, maybe he'll be another Bjorn Warner. But, Warner was definitely a rush end, a defensive end. So we'll see how he fits in.
He'll be in the game, in the mix, and he's got to compete. No matter, you throw a bunch of names up there, Denny, those guys are all fighting like heck, just like JJ and Cade, man. They are competing every day, and the coaches are evaluating them and trying to get the pecking order and their depth charts figured out.
Yeah, you never know when one of these moves is made. This is what I would ask Jim Harbaugh, or, if I had a chance and I was able to talk to Mike Elston, who's the defensive line coach. Are you moving Welschof because you think you need help at defensive end and you feel good about the guys on the interior, or, vice versa? And I think, though, there seems to be a lot of more unproven guys inside at defensive tackle and at nose guard. So I'm feeling like they feel pretty good. Remember, they also had a transfer from Central Florida, Cam Good. I think they feel pretty good about the guys inside, which is why that they're letting Welschof go and, try that defensive end. Because why would you let him go to another position if you didn't feel good about defensive tackle? But that's at least my thought.
No, Denny, you make a great point, because as a coach, those are decisions you've got to make. Do I want to, if I have second and third team reps, do I want to give them to a fifth-year senior, or do I want to give them to a young guy? Because Mozzie's probably going to be gone. This will be probably his last year. So you make a great point, and we don't know what it is. Is it that they think Julius has a better shot to give to really compete and help Michigan win on the edge, or do they want to free up playing time and snaps to get inside guys ready for the future? Because you're right, those would take snaps away from a guy like Benny or a guy like Ike, and who couldn't. We don't know what Jenkins is going to do. We could lose both of those guys next year, Jenkins and Smith, because Jenkins is going to have a great year. He's going to have a great year for Michigan.
All right, Scar, I've got one more question for you, and it goes to guys that are in front. And here I am just typing it out instead of asking you so you can read it. I'll put it up on the board for you. So you just talked about those guys inside. We have seen true freshmen. Heck, what was it? Zach Zinter as a guard played as a true freshman. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. How difficult would it be? You've got a couple true freshmen, Kenneth Grant, and you've got Mason Graham. How unlikely, how difficult at defensive tackle or nose guard? You just talked about the lining up between, 600 pounds of, giants, down in the trenches. What would these guys mean? How unheard of All right, I've said it enough. How difficult would it be for those guys to get on the field and get in some kind of rotation this year?
You know, a lot of times the interior front seven is, they're just not in the weight room enough. Both sides of the ball, offensive linemen, defensive linemen. But mentally, some of the positions are easier because there's not, you're playing inside defensive line, 3 technique, 1 technique, in between those 300-pound guys. There's not a lot of thinking sometimes. Just play with great technique and be big and strong enough to handle it. There's not, you've got to know how to line up in different defenses, but it's not like playing, outside linebacker or safety. And, where if a guy makes a mistake, it can cost you a game if he makes a mental mistake. So I think physically you could see it. Mentally. It's one of those are positions, especially where now I'm not sure what position Kenneth Grant plays, but Mason Graham, I saw him at camp and he's a good looking freshman. He plays with great technique. He's a big, thick kid. I think you're going to see him get into the games this year. He's a guy that they're going he's going to compete in there and he might get some snaps. I don't know where Kenneth Grant, where does he play, Denny?
He's going to be the nose guard or defensive tackle. Bruce Feldman, who works for The Athletic, he does a list. It's a popular list over the last couple of years where he goes and looks at a physical, I think he calls it the freak list, the guys that are just, doing just crazy type, whether it's shuttle drills or weightlifting things. And I don't have the story in front of me, but I think that he wanted to put Kenneth Grant on that list. So whatever his exploits, and I have to look at it a little bit more, but Kenneth Grant making the physically freak list as a freshman from Bruce Feldman was an eye opener for me. So I think a lot of people think, hey, maybe that means he can get on the field.
Yeah, see, I saw Graham because he was at spring training. He came in early. I don't think Grant was early. I didn't see him, but he's listen, my roommate, this is a long time ago, but he was a true freshman. He ended up starting midway through the season at interior defensive line. So,
who's that?
Guy by the name of Al Sinstich. He started as a true freshman in the Rose Bowl. Started about midway through his freshman year. There were some injuries, and he was played with great technique, and he was a strong guy, made plays, and he was recognized, and they brought him up. They kept moving him up, and next thing you know, he's starting. So you never know with injuries or how well some of these young guys develop. I mean, I wasn't nowhere near close to being ready to play as a freshman, but some guys are. So
it was a tweet from Bruce Feldman. I'm going to read it for you. All right, Scar. Bruce Feldman said he chatted with Jim Harbaugh for a while today. He was extremely excited about his freshman class. Among the guys generating a lot of buzz inside the Michigan program, a trio of freaky wide receivers and 2 big defensive tackles. Harbaugh told me Kenneth Grant weighs 349 and clocked a sub 540.
Wow. Huh. That's unbelievable. That's speed for a guy that big. And, there's talent there, man. And that's just, you got to find ways to develop them. And there's definitely going to be competition. And we've got a little farm system going on, Denny. You got to pay your dues, and hopefully they'll stick around, and we'll have great depth.
Yeah, the part in the position that you would think would be the most difficult to find any snaps would be at wide receiver, and yet 3 of them, Tyler Morris, Amarian Walker, and we saw Darius Clemens in the spring game. Harbaugh keeps mentioning those guys, so I don't know how they get on the field. Maybe it's special teams, maybe whatever. One of them finds their way into the 2 deep, but that's a tough position group to crack, considering Ronnie Bell's coming back, Cornelius Johnson, Sandra still. Who was it that gave him a shout out? It might have been Mozzie Smith, saying that he was going to be a surprise player. I don't know. So there's a lot of guys there. That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, there's 3 good looking receivers, and Jim has to. He does a good job of. Jim does a good job of mentioning players, trying to through the media, letting them know that, hey, the coach cares about you. Because the people back home are hearing the things the coach says. So he knows how to play that game, and obviously he has hope. He must be thinking good things about them because he's mentioning them, and because we don't know how long some of these other receivers are going to be around. They can have a good year and they'll be gone. So you got to continually develop your depth.
Great job, Scar. What's next for Michigan? Join Maize and Blue Review today. Go to michigan.rivals.com. You can get access to premium content right now for free for another 5 weeks, all the way to the season opener. Use the code UFMFree22 at checkout. That's michigan.rivals.com. We'll see you on the message board, Scar. We will see you coming up next Thursday. Training camp will be underway.
Yeah, I know the mindset these players have right now. They're winding down. There's a quiet state because they know what's coming, boy. The peace of mind is going to come to an end, and the wake-up calls and the early bed checks, that's coming.
Makes me want to get up at 6 o'clock and start running a mile. Let's go.
All right, Denny, I'm ready.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Go Blue.
There he is, Jim Scarcelli.